Awesome. Well, first, thanks so much to FAAAC, to the Columbia Museum of Art, particularly Jackie and Wilson. Thank you guys so much for hosting this conversation. We really think in preparing for it, we are all hopeful that this is the start of a broader conversation on Afrofuturism. So, our artists today, we'll start with Dogon Krigga, a collagist and a visual artist. Their practice is within Afro-Surrealism and Afrofuturism. And I have to mention that also a brother of Phi Beta Sigma. Thank you. All right. Raishad Glover is a conceptual artist whose work is inspired by community networking formats, ecological design services, and visual systems. Isaac Udogwu is an Afrofuturist, visual artist, and martial artist. And Cedric Umoja is an Afrofuturist, multidisciplinary artist, and an active practitioner of hip-hop culture. So in 2020, speaking at UCLA's Department of African American Studies virtual commencement, Tanana Reed, author and lecturer on Afrofuturism, paraphrased the great Angela Davis. In order to work toward a better future, we need to believe that future is possible. There's an understanding that Afrofuturism is a wide-ranging social, political, and artistic philosophy and movement that centers the African diaspora, the people and their cultures, as fundamentally essential in the creation of that future. We have a very human desire to define, to be able to put accessible boundaries on things. And I'm resistant to definitions being applied from outside of those of the culture or movement. In that manner, they tend to be catch-alls to the popular perspective. With that thought in mind, I'd like each artist to share their perspective on Afrofuturism and how it's applicable to their practice. And let's start with Brother Raishad.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, excellent. Well, Afrofuturism is like an element in my work. One thing that I focus on are foundations when it comes to designing my projects. And another thing that I focus on is sustainability. And I use mediums like hemp fiberboard. I also use mediums like LED lights and beeswax. And most of these are good for the environment. And that's why I try to think about sustainability when it comes to my definition of Afrofuturism.
Thank you. Dogon Krigga.
So for me, Afrofuturism, like this work is really like defining our own relationship with time. Particularly as like Black people in our history in this country, we haven't really had much control over our time. So like Afrofuturism is a way for me to just like regain that control, and you know explore the world, explore time like on our own means that aren't necessarily defined by like other people or like other governing systems that control like our day to day and year to year.
So for me, Afrofuturism is a lot like the idea behind Sankofa, which is an African proverb or ideal, where we look back and bring what's in our past or our traditions and bring it forward. Cedric once told me one day, Afrofuturism is simply Black people existing in the future, and that for me is very pivotal in my work because I love to create worlds where Black people are just existing and living without all these other things tied to them, just simply being.
Afrofuturism. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Excuse me. Afrofuturism for me um, has to do more so with it kind of, well, let me begin by saying that I had been doing work for some time in the space and just didn't know it. And Dogon Krigga actually brought it to me and was like, this is Afrofuturism. Like, what you're doing is Afrofuturism, by the way. Did you know that? And honestly, I didn't. It's just something I had always been doing to some degree. So I had to make that a point. But with that, I began to just dive deeper into this. And what I've come up with is that having to do with time, but knowing that it's no beginning or ending. As we begin to do more studying, we discover that Blackness has no beginning or ending. It just doesn't.
So let's expand a little bit on particularly the defining thought of it. How do you guys feel in terms of institutional responsibility for not only, I guess, fostering an Afrofuturist concept of philosophies, but expanding it and making it even more throughout their representative communities? I know that was a lot, right?
Yeah. It's like a two-parter.
I'm a professor at Claflin University, and I work with students from different backgrounds. And one thing that we try to focus on is identity and history. And with that, we look at different Afrofuturistic artists that can inspire that. And from there, I feel that by working in that type of path with the students, they can learn different formats that relates to that. Also by understanding the principles, the elements of design, such as line, shape, form, color. And so uh, basically, um, that's how I usually work with the community and with students.
I mentioned that in a lot of these, particularly artistic movements, usually it's historians who are going back and making that definition to say, this artist is an Afrofuturist, this artist is an impressionist. Being that Afrofuturism is something that lives and expands and grows, what are your thoughts on basically it becoming a catch-all? That if it's an artist that happens to be Black, it's very probable that they're going to be labeled as Afrofuturist, even if that active practitioner doesn't necessarily self-define themselves that way.
With the statement I made previously, no beginning and no end, the way that I see it is we're always going to have some different ideas and concepts pop up within that space, within the movement of the space. But knowing that there's no beginning nor end, chances are that we're going to cover everything anyways. So nobody's right or wrong in this space, to be honest. It's an open space where we allow ourselves to experiment and push forward in the works that we're making. So.
So I promised all four artists that I was going to broach this subject and that I would not allow it to take up the majority of the time. However, I recognize in 2022, if there is going to be a discussion on Afrofuturism, you cannot have said discussion without talking about Wakanda. So I'm going to put a couple of parameters on this. And I promise also I'm not going to let my inner fanboy take over this conversation. But with all of the amazing things and characters and concepts that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created, with T'Challa, with the concept of Wakanda definitely being one of them, it's not lost on me that those are two white gentlemen that created this character, that created this concept. And in the mid 60s, I am left to question whether their intent was to create this now global Afrofuturistic icon and concept. What are your thoughts on creations like Wakanda, like the Black Panther, like T'Challa, in terms of the long context of what their characters and concepts came from, and are they truly considered an futuristic concept now?
For me, at first, I wouldn't say it was Afrofuturism because the intent wasn't there. I feel like Afrofuturism is there had to be an intent with it, and it came from two white guys, so they can't really pull from that same pool that we're pulling from. You know, the experiences, the ideals, all the culture. So I think it was a good start for things. Like it opened up doors, but you see now in the last 5 years or maybe 6 years, I believe it started to become Afrofuturism because we started seeing more Black authors, writers, and directors and other people who look like us start to take the reins and take this story even further to something that we can all relate to. You know, I think now we can call it Afrofuturism, but before in the 60s, not so much.
Am I coming through? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I like that point that you made about, because I was going to say that because even though the concept was originally created by these two white guys, it's like the concept of it and the character is like a living, breathing body of work. So with Black people being the ones that tell the stories now, it becomes almost like a reclamation, like we're kind of like reclaiming that and making ours in that way. But I also see the limits of it because I see limits of it that are unfortunate because as dynamic as it is, it's still something that was like, I guess intentionally like created for a mainstream audience. And because it lives within like the walls of Marvel and that universe, and like in Martin, the creative cinematic universe of it, and then also that corporate identity, that it will forever be limited to really go where it should go. And we saw that, like you kind of see that in like, the politics and the choices that the characters will make has to be in line with, with this brand identity that's like very much kind of it's a big like representation of like American jingoism. And it's unfortunate that has to live in that because it's like in reality, like if you took that out of that Marvel context, it would probably be something completely different that people probably would be a lot scarier, to like a mainstream audience, with the ideas that it would have that, rightfully live in Afro, a lot of like Afrofuturist ideologies and like concepts. It's a radical thing. So like it's cool and all, and like it certainly has like elements of Afrofuturism, but we know that like it's like we know it can never really like push the envelope like what a lot of like our work intends to do.
Yeah, well, Wakanda's, definitely, a $1 billion industry right there. And I like to do a compare and contrast. So I look at artists like Janelle Monáe, Dirty Computer, and then also Carol Walker. And so these artists, from a feminine perspective, also have a strong point of when it comes to Afrofuturism. And then when it comes to a couple of white guys making the comic book Black Panther, um, I'm 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 not really that doesn't really bother me as much, because Afrofuturism also originated was coined by a white guy, and then he worked with Greg Tate, and then they both worked together to make it more of a movement. Uh, but just to reiterate, I like to compare and contrast to artists like Janelle Monáe or Kara Walker.
Um, Not to piggyback, but um, I have to say that the whole idea of what we've experienced recently in it is more of a product, and it sold well, but at the same time, it did give people who felt like they weren't represented anywhere. It gave everybody some representation from people who normally don't get it. So you have a a good and a bad type of situation, a give and a take, and you kind of have to decide where it works and where it doesn't work. But for me, as far as Afrofuturism is concerned, the technology, the culture, and we're talking language, we're talking like, style of dress, the way in which people carry themselves and express themselves, the culture within it allows us to be able to experience this idea of Afrofuturism and what it could be. And I think that you kind of, like I said before, you have to have, there's some give and take. So you might find some inspiration in it, but you also have to know that it's not based purely in what Afrofuturism is. So I'll just kind of leave it at
that. As a student of history, I always like to really look at the entirety of the context of concepts and things. And point well made. I think we have a history of incorporating and taking things that weren't necessarily originated by us, but through us claiming certain aspects of it, it's become, I think, an Afrofuturist concept. In terms of the arts industry and ownership, I think that's a good segue. I wanted to talk a lot about the concept of non-fungible tokens, of how, not just for Afrofuturists, but for artists across the board, there's an entirely new avenue towards what was a very structured industry and economic system to it. And I definitely want to start with Isaac to talk about NFTs.
Yeah, so I participate in NFTs. I view them as like you said, a segue, a way for us to really create wealth for ourselves. And it allows us to get in these spaces that we're usually not allowed in. I've started doing NFTs back a year ago, this month actually. And it has allowed me to navigate and value my work a lot more, in a sense that I don't have to work for somebody. I don't have to job search for commissions and work construction like I was before. And that's not just because I'm a digital artist or Afrofuturist. I believe it's an avenue for all artists to really get some real monetary gain and support themselves. Right now, I'm still applying for grants and doing other things to get money, but since NFTs, I've seen a great possibility, a really great possibility to find generational wealth through it. Honestly, you can create these things to create investments, and you're investing in yourself in the truest sense of the word. Yeah, it's something that can really change our lives with this thing. Yeah.
And Willie, not to put you on the spot, just because we had a really good conversation that I got a lot of education on it. Will you explain, I guess, the actual concept of what an NFT is?
Yeah. So NFTs, non-fungible tokens, essentially are digital assets that you can trade online or own. So say, for instance, I create a painting and I want to sell that painting as an NFT. You can say, well, I can just take a screenshot of that painting, but you won't realistically own that painting. Similar to the same way you can go view the Mona Lisa and take a picture of that. You can't really sell that picture that you took of that Mona Lisa. You'll have no value to it. There's no signature or anything attached to that photo that you just took. So with the NFT, which is created on the blockchain, which is essentially a link of different programs and blocks on a computer or the web that create a digital signature, a footprint essentially, that this is a authentic piece. So you can, I'll say you can compare it to trading cards, and that's where you get value, where you can give somebody money for a trading card, and say for instance you trade a Babe Ruth for a Jackie Robinson. It's not the same thing, but you decide the value of it, and that person can agree to that same value if these are two tradable things. That's where the non-fungible comes in, because if it's fungible, that means if I gave you $2 and you give me a $2 bill, it's the same currency that we just exchanged, same value, base value. But yeah, now you can do that with art, and the things you can. It's pretty incredible seeing what people are doing with this. For myself, I've sold quite a few NFTs, and what I like to write into what you call a smart contract is essentially what you the person who's purchased it is what you tell them what you're allowed to do with this piece. So say for instance, I create a video or a film. I can sell that film to the person. If I decide to give them IP or intellectual property or copyrights to this piece, I can have that written into the contract. If I don't want them to do anything with that piece, sell it or anything like that, just to have it stored somewhere, I can also write that into the contract. It's a way of protecting the artist that we haven't really seen in the industry or in the institutions as of late. It's really pro artist, and the thing is, you really have to study it and learn how to build it for yourself, because it's decentralized, which means it has no ties to anybody else. It's all on you. You're not relying on a bank or institution to hold these things. This is pretty much all on you to do. And yeah, you can if you really go for it, you can really take care of yourself with it. You can protect yourself. You can change a lot of things. You won't have to apply for grants anymore, I'll tell you that. I had a couple friends recently. It's amazing what's going on in the space, because a lot of digital artists were looked over because it's digital art. You can't hold it, you can't touch it. But now with these NFTs as digital assets that you can collect, you're starting to see some monetary gain and prominence in the art world. I've had a few friends who would never have been able to do the things they did without NFTs. Friends being auctioned off, having work auctioned through Sotheby's or Christie's, and myself having a show in Art Basel just this past December. I probably wouldn't have seen that opportunity if without the NFTs being a platform for me to break out like that. I'm also seeing people build schools with it, do amazing things with it. It's not just artwork, it's not just collectibles. You can create so many different things through NFTs. It's pretty amazing. It's very new. That's the most exciting thing about it. Right. Me and Kyle were talking about this a couple weeks ago or a week ago with comic books and comic artists. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but commissions for comic artists is pretty low, and then they don't get to hold any intellectual property. They don't get any revenue from the sales of those comics that they pretty much make the comics great. But with NFTs, they're able to go back and create their own. You can fund your own comic through these things. I'm actually starting my own short comic with some characters that I created of my family, and you can truly have control over your work. Popular comic artists are doing amazing things with this. And then photographers, anybody can do an NFT, honestly. It's a great thing. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be a tech person or anything like that. You can really study it a little bit and find your avenue for it. It's a different world. It's a new world. It's the metaverse, you know.
Any of our other artists, are y'all practicing in that space?
I've minted a handful of NFTs. I like the idea. I'm a little slow sometimes, like slow to like pick up on certain things. So like I haven't like really like leaned into it, but I do co-sign, you know, like what he was saying, that like the amount of control you can have over your own work and make sure it continuously comes back to you is really like it's unseen, like, you know. And a lot of times now, like, and I mean, I'm not really sure as like how far it goes with like contracts, like selling like, you know, multi-million-dollar pieces or, you know, 6-figure like, you know, physical pieces, but, you know, presumably somebody buys this thing and it's just like theirs now, and like you don't really know. But the fact that it leaves that footprint and it's all like technology, so like this thing can never be out of your sight, you know. Like you'll never not know like, oh, what happened to my NFT, like, you know. And you know, as far as I know, it can't be destroyed, it can't be deleted, so it's like, you know, once it's there, it's there.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool, especially for the implications it has for like censorship, you know, and you know, people like intentionally trying to like stifle or suppress like certain artistic like movements and things like that. And you know, and I'm like naturally like critical of things, so it raises like questions for me as well. You know, as far as like, you know, like what happens is like if the grid dies, like, you know what I'm saying, like, you know, like where does that go then? Or, you know, I guess a lot of my like, I guess concerns, or like, I don't want to call them doubts, because like I don't necessarily doubt it, but like some of the things I think about is just like, well, you know, are pretty like cataclysmic that, you know what I'm saying, I think it just really, if anything, to be like an anxiety. But but yeah, like I like it. I do intend to do more with it. And then also just seeing like the cool ways in which like you can blend like the traditional world, because like, I guess like what stops me from selling like a physical piece as an NFT, and it exists in both places, you know. So yeah, it's something that I definitely I encourage people to like familiarize themselves with, because it's not going to go anywhere now. Right. So like, you know, familiarize yourself with it, get into it early, and you know, I think it's neat.
Raishad or Cedric, any thoughts on
it? The way I see it is if it gives an artist an opportunity to advance and be more effective financially, because I think a lot of artists don't want to have to deal with grants. I'm going to be honest. We don't want to have to deal with commissions. We want to be able to make the art we want to be able to make without being told. So if this gives artists an avenue to do that, to make the money so they can make the art, I'm all for it. Am I practicing in that space? No. Isaac has come to me and said, hey, you need to jump on this. And you know, I'm kind of like Dogon Krigga in a way that I'm slow to move on a lot of stuff, but at the same time, I have some of these same ideas, like what if the grid crashes? But to be honest, if I already got the cash, I don't care if the grid crashes. They have to deal with that, not me. But I also see this like, because I'm a hip hop practitioner, so I also see it as how the music, hip hop culture music, how the music actually went from, we can go all the way back to what was that, Napster. The music got freed, and once the music got freed, then the industry itself had to scramble to try to figure out how to become profitable again. And when that happened, it actually opened up the doors for the artists to start having ways to make money and can have control in ways they never had before. So I see this as an opportunity that frees up a lot of artists to do the things that they want to do that they couldn't do previously. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think NFTs are definitely amazing. Right now, I'm trying to get some advice from Isaac about what's the best route to work on NFTs. And then also at Claflin, we just invited Beeple. He will be speaking at Claflin to the art students. So hope I can get some advice from him. But yeah, I'm mainly doing the research prospects of it. I do work digitally, and so I do have a lot of digital design, a lot of digital work. But yes, right now I'm just doing the research and getting advice before I make my move.
So in that thought of, I think you all mentioned that empowerment aspect of NFTs. Where do you see, I don't want to say the gatekeepers, but the formal structure of the art world now that individual artists do have that agency to act and to earn on their own? Where do you see those other structures, the galleries, the museums, the art brokers? How do you see them kind of beyond just the reactionary, okay, how can we still keep control of it? But how do you see them expanding that practice of empowerment for artists?
That's a very good question. So, Disney, for example, just today actually announced that they're looking for a NFT lead prospects person, which is a very large job. And it's interesting because a lot of these large institutions, a lot of these large media companies are searching, trying to figure out, they're scrambling, right? That's the reaction. But what they're trying to do now is they're trying to listen. I would say they're trying to listen and figure out how to navigate this thing, still make it profitable for themselves. But we're starting to see, at least in my space, a lot of people who would not be included in the conversations being included in the conversations. But we still have to fight for those spaces and make it known. Because it's very much a parallel to what's going on in the real art world. We still have disadvantages, but it's not, the gap is not as wide as it is in the real world as it is in the metaverse. I guess I'll have to say. But you're starting to see more brands, more institutions, more things step down and listen a little bit more instead of gatekeeping. Now we are the gatekeepers to them, because the NFT space is a very tight-knit community. And ASAP Rocky, a rapper, tried to drop an NFT earlier last year, I would say maybe in March. It didn't do well. You would assume that it would because he's known, he's famous and all these things, but it didn't do well because he wasn't a part of the space. And he had no real power in the space. A lot of the people were like, you haven't been here, you haven't talked to us, you haven't spoken with us, you're just trying to do a cash grab. We won't allow that. And whenever new people try to join in the space, or big companies try to join in the space, they have to go through that same assessment that we had to go through to get to them. The roles have reversed in a sense with NFTs.
I think about so from outside being an actual like an NFT creator, because if you're a creator, you make something and it sells, like you get that capital, and that capital becomes power. But I guess it's a criticism I have for the concept is there's still a buy-in to crypto. You can't buy in what you don't already have. Therefore, me buying into crypto and, Bezos buying into crypto is a completely different buy-in. So yeah, I mean, we literally watched we watched Elon Musk tank an entire coin with one tweet. So so like where does the power still lie? It still lies in capital. So I don't like. So I don't want to, and I'm not trying to like. I don't knock the enthusiasm for it because it's important to be enthusiastic about these things and still carve out that space. But like, what do we do? How exactly do we counteract like that? Because the like when you study, when you understand like the way like people are like social politics and like social like mindset of control, um like controlling people and what they do, all of that lies outside of the technology. It lies outside of things being centralized or like decentralized or whatever. So like the social responsibility for that crypto space and like blockchain technology, like what do we do about that? Like like how do like, and you explained, like you touched on like how do you keep people out, but like if Amazon wanted in, Amazon's getting in. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so, and it's like ultimately we talk like I know a little bit about like like what it takes to like get a coin going and everything. Like they're their own like micro economies, and like it does become a bit of a popularity thing because it's like, again, like if nobody knows you, nobody's gonna buy from you. But that's not different from here. Like if nobody knows you, nobody's going to put a spotlight on you until you make the piece or you make the body of work that like gets people's attention and like be still grind and like and push it. So I do have a little concern about like, are we in a bubble right now where like it's dope for now, but then like most social media sites, like it's dope, it works for what it does up until the people with money decide they want control over it, and then like even when it comes to like minting the coins and stuff, like I can do what I can do with my home rig, but like I can't stop a corporation. Like how do you stop a corporation from buying a warehouse and filling it with like computers capable of like minting, and then like they're like buying in like that, and then I don't put like hope in like the government to keep us safe or whatever, but with it being completely unregulated, I'm sorry, I kind of just jumped out. No, but like with it being so like with it being unregulated, then like and for instance, I don't want to like put you on the spot, but more of like a hypothetical thing. Like, say somebody does like take your NFT and like does something funky with it, finds a way to take it. What if they take it and remint their own? Like, so now what do we do to actually like stop them? Do we bring them to court now? What is the like? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you bring them to court now, it's still the lawyer I can afford versus the lawyer they can afford. You know what I'm saying? So like, what happens when things do go sideways? That's what I'm interested. That's what I pay attention to. Not to be like, not to be like a naysayer, or like, just like a doomsayer, but like, I want to see where it fails to see how it can, how it can adjust to that, how it can adjust to people abusing it, because I mean, it's kind of a gold rush now, but like, let's see what happens when, things don't quite go, things don't follow that idealized like path of it. And I think that will like really prove its power to me. Mm-hmm. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. The power of conversations is that they go where they go. Raishad, if you would you talk a bit about your practice, particularly in terms of sustainability? I know you do incorporate Afrofuturistic thought, but you wouldn't necessarily call yourself strictly an Afrofuturist. And I think it would definitely be an interesting thing for our audience for you to talk about your practice.
I guess Afrofuturism to me is a part, it's not a whole. So there's definitely different facets of me and in my artwork that talks about Afrofuturism. And I usually work with different elements like the cube. And the cube acts as a foundation. And this cube can be a regular cube or it could be a cube to a pyramid. And so I like the viewer to think macro and micro and macro, something big, something small, could be the organism. And so I kind of play with that. And so with that, when it comes to sustainability, um, I like to. I know that like to jump back to the NFTs real quick. That's like a tool. And so when it comes to sustainability, you have different tools that you use and different mediums that you use. And so with the mediums that I use, I try to find out which ones are best for the environment, and then work from there. Um, uh, so I'm still doing research on all different types of materials. But like I said, what I'm used to working with are materials such like beeswax, materials such as hemp fiberboard, whereas I get that from Atlanta, and they have a company and also in California, and they use it for building sustainable buildings. Um, and then LED lights as well. Instead of using a regular fluorescent light, I like using LEDs as well in order to make my compositions stand out and be a lot stronger.
Thank you. In the preparation for this, I had individual conversations with all four artists. So yeah, it's time for me to drop that heavy question that I asked each of you. We are hopeful that this is the start of a broader conversation. That it isn't a one and done conversation on the subject of Afrofuturism. If there is one concept, what would you each say the most important thing to take from the start of this conversation tonight would be that you want everyone to take with them or to continue discussing?
So, I think like the question is kind of like, where do we go from here? And I think that that's a question that we're all like, that's an ongoing question that we're all answering within like the realm of Afrofuturism, because with it being, a speculative practice, or like a practice of, manipulating or being in a space or being in a time that has yet to pass, or it's not like within the ever present now. That's part of like, I guess, like what we're approaching, like what world are we creating when we're creating a world? What things are we like keeping or discarding? So I think that for a lot of the subject matter and the content that we like approach with our work, I think it's important that we start, or not to start because people already do this, but to create work that, and you mentioned this before about Black people just simply existing. I think that is really important for anybody who's like making work, especially work about, a speck of time or into the future, just us being without, being like saddled by the struggle, having to, creating a world that's in response to, injustice, because in that sense, you're still like responding to that. So, what does it look like just to be like, well, like imagining like a timeline where there never was, that struggle. And then like, just what is that? What would that be? What would our be if it wasn't a constant response to like injustice, or a constant response to trauma, or like the recollecting of it, or retelling of it, the memorialization of it? Like, I think that those things are important to like, healing as a like culture and community, but like at the same time, just like what is it like? What is the whimsical like nature and value of like the work we do, where it's like it's just is a thing, and there isn't like a looming big bad that we're constantly like, sheltering ourselves from, or having like to like fight against or respond to. Like that's what I think. Like art that's going to like change and start creating you have to start creating that now. So like that's the focus of my work. That's something that I'll continue to do in what I do.
else want to jump in?
For me, what I want everybody to leave with, at least something to think about, is there's really no future without Black people. That's Afrofuturism through and through. We here, we're gonna still be here, and we've been here. You know.
I think about something that Arthur Jaffers said, and it was pretty potent. It hit me in the head. He said that, now imagine if, and this is not verbatim, but imagine if we didn't have all the atrocities that occurred to Black people, we wouldn't be where we're at right now. So to take those things away, what would we be removing? We could be removing ourselves. And I think about that. I think about that because the work that we are, well, at least I'll say for myself, I've seen where people have made work within our space, and I feel like it speaks from a certain space, but it doesn't, but what it does is it doesn't, what does it lead us? So it kind of leads us where we've already been. And I don't think that, and not to take anything away from that, because I feel like that's a foundation, and we need a foundation in order to be able to move forward. And so with that being said, I feel like to be able to make this work in the speculative manner that I'm making it, and that I think a lot of other Afrofuturists are making it, it's to push this whole idea of timelessness. So if you were to leave today with anything, I would say, understand that we're speaking of a concept that this society doesn't really know how to function without. Timelessness is what we're talking about. And I'll just kind of leave it there.
I like to think about leaving it with creativity, innovation, social impact. I think those are definitely very important things to get out of Afrofuturism. Being innovative, making it into your own lab, becoming your own scientist, and then work from there.